Adolf is just nope.
Did you catch it? Did you get it in time?
I hope so.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
I was gonna say, wait, hold on, where's what's his face? You two had to sit through that terrible movie.
I know, and yet
where the fuck is he?
we did the summoning and he didn't work.
Huh.
You better
So we
fucking
get to
show, dude.
It's not his real name. That's why.
Without him.
I just finished one of his movies and I'm in emotional turmoil. Like
I was gonna say, now we're definitely gonna have to do 2 movies apiece because we're missing someone.
That's true.
All right.
Do we want to start with the nameless, indefensible, or
What do
he
his
can't
movies?
defend
Well,
himself? I should say.
I was gonna say because I didn't watch his that movie, so you go right ahead and tear into
he
it.
might show up, so I would almost save them for when he does.
Right.
Personally,
I
it might just be delayed.
fair. I guess we'll be fair.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, also since we've gotten a lot of new subscribers, for all the people who are maybe watching our other show, this is why we weren't recording. This is where we talk about whatever we want to, because we used to talk a lot before the show and after the show. And we thought, why not just make it a show? And we've been kind of doing movie themes a lot because it's easy, except for Justin. It's easy-ish for everybody else.
It's
It's
Some of us
like
are just
1.5 times
possible.
So, yeah.
We knew the people out there wanted to see more of us, so here we are.
Yeah.
Except
This is
you
like
can't
the
see
worst
EG,
it's been for
and if
me,
you're listening,
so.
you've never seen any of us. But we're here.
Yeah, but we have never seen any of us either. So what's the point?
Looks like we've got Gur in the chat with "This is my favorite show." So,
What, Vader's in?
Whoa, EG, are you okay there?
Yeah, I know, right? The emergency is coming. I told them I had to go mobile today because of construction upstairs, and now apparently there's a fire.
and now it's even worse. Yeah. Never mind. I'm not even going to say it.
Do it.
Who's going first? So,
I don't care. I can go first
You
this time
not-
if you people want.
Anyone currently attending?
Here, there you go. That makes it easy.
All right.
I get to go first? Well, I mean, one of these is easy. It's like the quintessential drama of all time. Even though
Train
we
to
just had this.
Busan, I agree.
Yeah, right. The one you didn't see.
I didn't see any of them, so
But you have seen The Godfather in the past.
like once
you
upon
not?
a time. This is the one with the horse, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
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 And his
So I
little
mean,
friend.
The Godfather. I'll admit, when we were picking these movies, I kind of forgot to put the list in. So The Godfather was the first one that just popped into mind. Like, oh, this is a drama, and I watch it all the time. That'll go on. But yeah, I mean, Godfather to me is it's one of those cliche. This is great American classic movie. It happens to be very good. I mean, I like slow build movies like this. I enjoy that kind of stuff just fine. I can easily sit there and watch for 3 hours. A good movie. And when you got that many good performances and that good a story, it's there's nothing revolutionary about it. It's a guy who doesn't want to become his father and then ends up essentially becoming worse than him in a lot of ways. Interwoven with a different time and place in America, but that can easily be recognizable to everybody today. And it's got some of the great one-liners of all time, and it's just to me it's an easy watch, even though most people will probably tell you that they want to watch paint dry instead.
Yeah. I mean, all good, but I think it's The Godfather's it's a great movie, right? And yeah, I mean, it's not my favorite gangster movie, but we've already had my favorite gangster movie on earlier with Goodfellas. But it is a good movie.
Yeah, I can't find fault with the movie except for the fact I have this feeling of being bored, but I can't put as to why. I wish I could.
Oh, this is a 3.5-hour movie, and some parts are probably going to get you more than others. So the pacing is a little, it's drawn out.
I mean, it must be something about the pacing. And like the first time I had watched it years ago, I just remember feeling so bored of like, I really don't care anything about Sicily. Like, you could have cut the whole thing about Sicily out, and it would have been fine, I think.
Well, that's the second one. Oh no! Wait, you're talking about when he goes there.
When he hides.
Yeah, and then he has a wife, and the only interesting part was when she died. I was a little bit more
yeah,
gracious this time around. It's just
I was going to say it's kind of character important that he goes there.
kind of, but it's just condensing. Why do I have to be bored throughout it? I don't
have
know.
to.
But I can't necessarily keep up with it. Like sometimes things just need time.
I mean, they have to make you care. Like, it's probably why you care that she dies. They have to make you care that she dies, and they also have to make you care about. He has this, like, kind of, I would say, a decent life there, away from everything that he enjoys, and he builds up this, like, I would say, friendly, trusting relationship with the guy who ends up betraying him. That also needs time to build. But it's character important, but it doesn't feel that plot relevant for the movie. Like for the development of the story back in the US.
No, it's not. It's definitely like 90% character build, because it's essentially, Michael never wanted to get into this life. He does this one thing that causes him to have to flee the country, and he sort of goes back to thinking, well, okay, so that was just one thing. It was extenuating circumstance, but now I'm still going to be me apart from this life, and the life gets to him there anyway. And that's essentially the fundamental shift, because when he comes back, he's basically decided, no, this is my life now.
Can we swear yet? Are we past?
Yeah.
We're past that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You dropped an F-bomb in like the first 25 seconds, dude. Like,
okay.
So as per usual,
I dropped that unintentionally. Then I just saw in the chat we have Skylar saying Godfather 3. She likes that person likes it more than Godfather 2, and I'm just like, hold the fuck up! What are you saying?
You're
Godfather
saying the
2 is
wrong
the best
thing.
one, and 3 is by far the worst one. God
that's
damn!
Not really. Yeah, no. Especially if you ever read the original screenplay of what The Godfather 3 was supposed to be and what it then became, it's like we were robbed of potentially the greatest trilogy of all time in a lot of ways. But that's neither here nor there, because we're talking about the first one.
I had some indignation I had to get out there.
No, it's correct. It's fundamental. That needs to be challenged at every turn. Anyone who says, it's like people who say that Temple of Doom is the best Indiana Jones one. You're wrong, and you need to be told you're wrong.
I like that one. I don't.
You can like it. It's just not the best one.
I think I like it better than the first one.
Just stop. You just go away. Go do something. Go play in the corner.
But yeah, Godfather, the first one of the all-time greats. Other than some pacing, what else is there to say about it's?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's kind of a cliche. It's one step below picking Citizen Kane type deal for, greatest drama, greatest movie, greatest this, that, and the other thing.
Drama choice.
That's a weird way to say The Crucible. So, because ironically, like, nobody picked Citizen Kane. So,
right. Well, I mean, I still don't think I've ever seen Citizen Kane all the way through. I know all the stuff that happens, but it's one of those movies. It's that and 12 Angry Men. I've never actually just sat down and watched them all the way through. One day. And then the second one was Train to Busan, which is actually a more recent movie I watched. I only watched that for the first time in the last year and a half.
That was
I really liked it when the first time I saw it. I'm not huge into zombie movies. I think my favorite zombie movie is probably Shaun of the Dead. I don't really care about the serious zombie movies, quote unquote. Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead and 28 Days Later and all this kind of stuff. Never really, I didn't, some of them were enjoyable, but I didn't really care. This one I liked quite a bit. This one, especially the character stuff, the way people behaved was probably some of the most believable I've seen in a zombie movie as to how characters would act.
They'd run up to them and give them hugs.
Yeah. The self-interest angle and the how, because a lot of zombie movies are sort of this cliche, well, the humans are kind of the monsters actually because of this, that, and the other thing.
You haven't watched a ton, but okay.
No, in the way they treat
like
each
sometimes, sure, 28 days later, I would say.
Okay, sure. You're a more zombie expert than we are, but a vast majority of the zombie movies I've watched, the drama and the villain, like the zombie thing is a backdrop for the human stories, and usually the humans are the villains.
I mean, I think
that's saying a lot, right? Like I could think of some examples where that's the case, right? But not always. And especially like some of the early ones are like allegories for people. The zombies, like especially the original Dawn of the Dead, for example, like there's this whole sequence at the end where the zombies finally get into the mall and they basically just go about their lives shopping, because the whole point is like it's an anti-corporate type of like protest thing at the end of the day. It's not like like yes, there are shitty people in a lot of the movies and stuff, but it's not always like that. And that's why, so part of the reason why I'm quibbling is because that I felt like that's what made The Walking Dead stand out. And I feel like I mentioned that before, but The Walking Dead, absolutely, the zombies are a backdrop and people are bastards, right? The scariest things that happen in The Walking Dead from like an existential perspective are the governor and Negan, and those dudes are both dudes. They're not zombies, right? There isn't any mega zombie, like it's not fucking Resident Evil or whatever. So anyway, soapbox done.
So this is definitely more in that vein, and I think it's probably the best one I've seen as far as that type of harder hitting, people are the bastards. Even the worst people in this movie get like a glimmer of characterization of the point where it's like, all right, yes, they're not just stark raving evil. So that I also appreciate, because generally speaking, people who are just shitty to be shitty it's a little lazy, only because you get enough of that in real life in your very quick encounters with people, and you just write them off that way.
Right.
But anyway, I think it's well done. I think it's well paced. All that good stuff. The action ramps up in pretty much all the right places. The deaths of people that you come to really appreciate are impactful. Yeah.
I don't remember his name, but the guy with the pregnant wife.
Chad. Just call him Chad, because that's who he is. He's a Chad.
Real MVP.
Yeah.
No, he's a Chad.
I like this movie. It was good. I told my husband afterwards, like, I'll put it up with 28 Days of, like, it is a serious thing. It had the zombies. It had some rules. It had the human experiences and reactions into it. It was good.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, well, okay. I mean, that's pretty high praise. So, like, 28 Days Later isn't one of my favorites or anything like that, but it's a very solid movie. So,
So I haven't seen many zombie movies, but 28 Days has always been the best zombie movie I've seen. And nothing's unranked that yet, but I haven't seen many.
Have I not made you guys watch like the Dawn of the Dead remake and what is it? Land of the Dead?
No.
There's so
Even
many
my
good
husband
ones.
was surprised I hadn't seen Dawn of the Dead. He's just put it on. I've got like 20 minutes into it, and then I had to sleep because it was like 3 a.m. But I haven't seen many zombie movies, and then I tried to watch World War Z to see if that was good leading up to Train.
Oh no, God!
Fucking sucked.
And it wasn't.
You could have warned me. Any of you.
How many times have I said it?
Scientist death was stupid. You complained about the scientist shooting, and then you didn't tell me the rest of the movie also sucked.
You're right. In 2 weeks, I will dissect this movie and tell you all of the ways in which it sucks, so that you don't go like. Let's do a pro-con list. I think pros is it's got Brad Pitt in it. I think. That's
pretty
a pro.
much the only pro, yeah.
And then, right. And then it just gets worse from there. Like, no, it's like EG said, like the tidal wave of zombies. Like once they get to Israel, it just shits the bed. Like just the whole thing. Yeah. It turns into just diarrhea of bad movie, and it just does not get redeemed at any point. No, yeah. So I'm sorry that I did not adequately prepare you. Now,
thank you.
Because you've only made it 20 minutes into literally one, like my favorite zombie movie, I'm going to tell you that it probably didn't age well. And when I've shared it with girls in the past, people I was dating or whomever, like there are some
broke up with
scenes. No, there are some scenes in that movie that are going to be very hard to digest, especially like in this day and age. But it's generally my favorite. I think some of it doesn't age well. And like when I got a different kind of context, I was like, okay, I can see why this bothers some people. But
which
it's
one was
Reigns in it.
The title?
The Dawn of the Dead remake. Yeah, 2004. So Zack Schneider, like pretty much his first movie,
James
more
Gunn?
or less.
I
Like,
saw his name on there. I was like, oh, okay.
yeah,
I could
because he wrote it, and I didn't realize that until I was like, how did Zack Snyder do this? And then go,
He didn't.
fuck up. Well, yeah, because like especially with Army of the Dead, right? That was the latest one. It's like, how did he like fuck that up? And it's like because he didn't write it, James Gunn wrote it. Oh,
That's
that
the one
makes
in the
a lot more
mall
sense.
with the pregnancy and the gun store across the street. Yeah, I like that one.
Yes. Yeah, and I really like the two main characters are like, for lack of a better turn of phrase, they're nobody. Like, they're not A-listers. They're not anything. Like, the next time that I remember seeing her pop up is in Splice, I think, and that's awful. And then I saw him crop up. He's actually in an episode of Discovery as a villain, which was fantastic. You know, so it's just like, I recognize all of these actors and actresses because I love this movie so much. But like Ving Rhames is in it, and he's pretty good. But it is also a Hollywood movie, you know. Like one of my favorites is the whole, unnecessary racking of the shotgun, a Ving Rhames staple, for this movie.
I
where
only
it's like,
just got to him pointing the shotgun at her face, and like a little bit after that, so I've not seen almost anything.
Yeah,
of this
and
movie.
the opening's so good. I am sorry, yeah, because when they scale back and you see like the carnage and everything, and it's just like, oh shit, like every time.
I really like this one. I think this one, Train to Busan and Shaun of the Dead are the three zombie movies that I think stand out as the three best.
Have you seen 28 Days?
So I've seen 28 Days, and I find it a little boring, but it's pretty good. So it's pretty high up there. The pacing gets me a little, I think, something from what I remember.
Yeah, I like 28 Days as far as like a realistic look. It also has one of my favorite jokes in like of all time. It comes from 28 Days Later, where they like run into him after he finally gets out, and they tell him the joke about the giraffe going to the bar. One of my favorite jokes. I'm not even kidding. And then Land of the Dead is one of my favorites, but I think just because it's kind of ridiculous, like it edges into ridiculous territory, and it edges into the whole like Dennis
Tower and semi-intelligent zombie. I vaguely remember that one.
Dennis Hopper is the villain, and then the zombies start to like remember, so they start to like be able to use guns and shit, and like I don't like the ridiculous zombie movies, but this one is just on the inside because like most of the main characters are at least competent and that sort of thing. I've completely hijacked this episode, but anyway, it's also got John Leguizamo in it.
Like some form of monster movie, something. We'll get there. We'll get there.
I will
say what happens when I pick a zombie movie and Justin just goes off to the races and he didn't even watch it.
I know, right? But I know about the adjacent topics. So
I will say, in the defense of you actually liking that one, Justin, I watched that as a teenager. This was like 15 plus years ago, and I still vaguely remember parts from it. So it has to have been decent.
Right. Yeah, I mean, if I'm introducing people to zombies and they're like, why do you like it? It's these two movies, and then I've got like a mini series from the UK and a few others that are like good, and that was before Walking Dead came out and everything. And then like there's so many great lines in Land of the Dead too, where it's like they get like a strike team, and they're like, they're handing out rifles, and they give this one guy who's been like, was saved from a fire, so he's only got one good eye, and he's like, this gun fires X number of rounds per minute, and he's like, yeah, I don't normally need that many, because he's a sharpshooter. So it's just, I don't know, it's good. Okay, I'm shutting up.
Okay, who's next?
I don't know, whoever you put on the screen.
Uh-oh. Do you want me to do it in that order? No. I know, right? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so Crucible. Like, I'm gonna be honest, 90% of why I like the Crucible and why it's my favorite story is Giles Corey. So, and it's funny because in rewatching, I obviously put him way, way higher up on a pedestal than the movie gives him credit for. I think he gets better in some other renditions and also the book. But Giles Corey, if you're not familiar with the story, his final words are "more weight," as they are literally pressing him, is what they called it, with stones. They're putting stones on his chest to try and torture a witness out of him so that they can go after this witness. And he literally was stubborn to death. So anytime that you think I'm being unreasonable, just know who I've got on a pedestal and why I'm even more stubborn than that. But yeah, so like, I don't know. There's so much that you could unpack here. Winona Ryder is the quote unquote villain, in my opinion, in this, because as much as you could take the slant that, you know, maybe the devil was legitimately at work and that sort of thing, I take a more secular kind of analysis of it.
The point of the movie, like, at all, I think.
Well, it is for their perspective, but yeah, I read between the lines, and I think it's about people being bastards to each other. And to borrow a line from The Green Mile, I'm just tired of people hurting each other, because that's what the Crucible is. They got caught with their hand in the cookie jar and got 17, 19 people killed as a result of it. Like, Jesus Christ. Like, you know, and you get to the point where it's like, it starts out with like, you know, the one minister sort of buys into it, but you can kind of tell. So Senator Kelly from X-Men, I can't remember, you know, his character.
That's what
I was like, oh my God, this movie has amazing casting, considering it was 1996 and nobody knew who any of these people were at the time, except for like Winona Ryder.
Wow.
Yeah, so I've only seen that guy in two things, The Crucible and X-Men, but he's always been that slimy bastard.
The same guy. He's the same dude.
Yeah.
Just 200
so
years apart.
Because he definitely kind of like buys into it to give himself some more clout in the village and to save his own hide a little bit, but then you get Hale, you know, Reverend Hale or whatever his name was, right? And so like he comes in and he at least thinks that he's helped people before and he's actually done a thing. And so he gets swept up into it until he catches his senses, and then he quits the judge, like the court, he quits the trial, and he's trying to save people legitimately, right? And so you just contrast the two of like who's trying to get something out of this and who's trying to do legitimate good. You know, so there's some contrast there. I remember hating on the business person much more being a bastard when I watched this in the past, because it's so clear that he's offing his neighbors to get their land. You know, because one of the serious questions in times like these is like, who is benefiting from this narrative, right? And the judge, I think, gets so wrapped up into the fact that he's trying to do good, that he's trying to like save the province or whatever, but to the point where like, if it's outside of his worldview, he just dismisses it, right? You have Mary kind of like turncoats on the rest of the group, but because there's, you know, these 14 girls or however many there were, and she's the only one that broke line, you know, they think she's, you know, a part of the problem. And, you know, you get Giles Corey and John Proctor, who are like these generally kind of stand-up dudes. Like obviously John Proctor's got, you know, he's got red on his ledger or whatever, you know, because we care about that back then. You know, it's like, okay, that's a problem, but otherwise comparatively, this dude has been completely on the level. He's a hard worker. He keeps himself to his own place. But then they start like, I mean, the one that should have jettisoned it is when they went after what's her face, like the old lady that was like the righteous girl in town. And it's like, oh, she's with the devil. Yeah, Goody Nurse. Thank you. I was like, I remember Goody, but there was like 3 Goodies.
Yeah, Goody was wife. Goody was like Mrs. That's why she was Goody Proctor. Mrs.
Oh,
Proctor
gotcha.
at the time, because she was
like, Goody sounded like a title to me in the movie, but I wasn't really sure.
Right.
Yeah, it was
I didn't do additional research past that or anything, but yeah. So when they go after Goody Nurse, and right, and then they go after like a couple of the old dudes that are practically like immobile, you know, and it's just like, not one time did you guys just straight up, because to them they were like, oh well, he sent out his spirit, so who cares how, you know, like that he's got 2 canes and can't fucking walk. You know, he glared at me that one time, so he's evil. And it's so tough to watch going backwards. But then it's also unfortunately super prescient as well. And you know, like we're seeing hints towards like maybe we want to be a theocracy or something like that. And it's like, oh, I don't know, how did that work out the last time? You know, like, so I'm definitely watching. Yeah, right. I'm definitely watching this with like, man, this unfortunately, I feel like echoes some things that are going on now. I mean, if you think that I'm being, like I'm using too much hyperbole and you're like, oh man, I really hope this happens and whatever, like the stuff that makes me pause in specific, like there's a long list and we could get into all of that. But like the whole bombing of the Guidestone in Georgia is straight up like a witch trial type of thing where they were just like, that Guidestone's been there for 100 years, but the devil's using it now. So we blew it up. Like that's the shit that scares me, right? And that's the kind of thinking that you get out of the Crucible. But
I'm out of the loop on this one.
Yeah. So there was a Guidestone that was commissioned like over 100 years ago that basically was an idea like it could be used as a calendar, a compass, and something else. And then it had translations in like 20 or some odd different languages. Some of this stuff I'm fuzzy on the details, obviously, but it was an idea that it could survive a natural disaster or something like that, and then it could be used to rebuild society. It was one of those cheeky little things. Obviously, whatever they used to blow it up was somewhat effective, and then local authorities just took it down like the same day because they deemed it a hazard at that point. But yeah, it's like some person who's running for like state senator or something like that, like a state legislature position, decided that it was, like it was something to do with the was it 1980? I thought it was like 1908. Like that's why I keep saying 100 years. But anyway, yeah, so she said something about it having to do with the devil, and then, it got like blown up, shortly thereafter. But
like an actual someone running for office who has legitimate chances.
You can't be surprised at this point in this country.
I mean, not anymore, I guess, but yeah, like remember when, adding an E at the end of potato was enough to not run for president? I miss those days. So, but But yeah, so anyway, the Crucible. The main thing that I hadn't remembered, we were talking a little bit about the show, is like I remember it being bad, but I forgot how much they kind of go into when Winona Ryder's character just being just like straight evil and so manipulative and that sort of thing. And like John Proctor did his best Hail Mary at the end, where he's like, he confesses because he knows that she's either going to have to let him die or she's going to have to confess that the whole thing is horseshit, and she doesn't. She just, she tries to run away, or does in the movie. I don't remember if she made it all the way out, but
steals 31 pounds from her uncle and runs away.
Yeah.
31 pounds. I just didn't remember if they caught her by the end, but
no, they never did.
Of course not.
Yeah.
She got on a ship and fucked off somewhere. So.
Right. Yeah. It just, nauseating is the best way to say it. So, but yes, I did like 80-90% pick it for Giles Corey. Totally worth it in my opinion. No regrets. So all the other stuff is all the other stuff is happy to give him the flavor that we needed from him. Like I especially love, like in a tragic kind of way, that he accidentally implicates his wife just kind of being a bastard. Where it's just like they're clearly that old couple that people joked about for the last, 40, 50, 500 years, whatever, where it's just like, we've been married, but we don't like it. And so he's like, sometimes she leaves the light on and I'm trying to sleep. Or, in this case, he's like, well, I couldn't say my prayers, but then she left and all of a sudden I could. And I think he's just being cheeky about it, but boy, did he joke to the wrong people, like, and I think that's where you kind of see Reverend Hale and a few of the others flip on this, where it was like, this is crossed over from possibly legitimate to being like, we're going to get all of the people we don't like out of the way, and they start to see that maybe Satan's on the wrong, like it's not on the side we thought he was on, maybe he has corrupted the courts or whatever else, but yeah, just wild. Okay, Green Mile. I don't know. Do you guys want to weigh in on the Crucible?
Nope.
Was it boring? Was it terrible?
No, I've never liked that movie, but for the content, not for. I mean, I don't think it's the greatest well-made movie either. But I've always hated those kind of people, so it's easy to understand the. It's an interesting narrative in principle. It's just when you watch it, you're like,
yeah, it is like an exercise in frustration, but it's not a bad made movie. It was more exciting than The Godfather. I mean, It's hard to compare the two, honestly, but
if
what happens pacing wise, there's some character, but it's very like court and drama. It does feel like there's more happening.
The pacing does feel a little bit better, more like I can pay attention to this. It's a good movie. I would have to say that I like it. It's just not one that I'm gonna want to watch very often. Mostly, I mean, I remember it decently well enough. I don't need to watch it.
I found it very like a lot of these movies. It was, you know, they're not maybe rewatchable movies. They're frustrating to watch. They get to you, right? Like emotionally, a lot of them as well. Like I found The Crucible like quite like almost sickening, and they was like, yeah, humans are stupid, and this is why I hate religion.
People, what a bunch of bastards. But yeah, and I mean that's the other thing. Like I always I always kind of bring that up with people when they're like, "Oh my God, religion's terrible." It was like, no, religion is power, and power corrupts, right? Like if you look at The Crucible, you look at what happens in like medieval times with the Catholic Church and shit like that. These guys are all just bastards. Religion was the tool that they use. Sometimes it's the crown, sometimes it's the Pope, sometimes it's just like. Yeah, right. Sometimes it's just a local lord or whatever. But like, even money is an analog for power, especially these days, right? So that's what you need to follow. Like, I don't get so bogged down in the religious side because like these guys aren't following their own tenets, right? Like that's another reason why I try to drive that wedge in between religion and power, right? Because you do have the religious people that actually follow what they preach and they follow the book and that sort of thing. And that's great, when that happens and whatnot. But then you can even see it in this movie, right? The difference between the two reverends. They're the exact same religion. They both theoretically have very similar teachings. One guy saw it as a way to, literally 31 pounds goes missing. And what is he worried about? Not her safety, not, my name, not anything like that. I'm destitute now is what he says. Oh my God, I'm penniless. And whereas like Reverend Hale is like, so 19 people just hung and I'm on the hook for it. That's my soul, so there's a difference there, even internally to the religion, right? And I think it's all about power, and in the Crucible, it's a lot about what they can get for themselves, So anyway, people are bastards, yes, and that's why we're the true monsters. So, like zombie movies teach us, apparently. So,
yep, every single one of them, without exception.
Right.
So speaking. Daniel Day-Lewis was supposed to be in this movie.
Yeah.
Wasn't he the main guy?
He was.
Like he was Proctor, wasn't he?
Which version did you watch?
Okay, it's a bad
joke. I
joke.
know, he's doing the method acting joke.
I'm doing it. Honestly, this is one of the few movies that he's in where I was he's like, that's Daniel Day-Lewis. There are other movies where it's just like, wait, that was Daniel Day-Lewis?
Right. Yeah, I mean, and in talking about method acting, like I think they were saying like he helped build his house and then like didn't bathe while he was out there, just all of that stuff. So it's just like he went all in, So yeah,
his teeth rotted out and everything. I don't know about that, but his teeth got gross.
Yeah, unfortunate.
Yeah. Speaking of unfortunate teeth, The Green Mile. No. Yeah, I think the other thing you were talking about is like rewatches. Like I have not rewatched this since I was in high school, so that's where my memory becomes a little fuzzy. But I think it's a must watch. I don't necessarily think it's like must watch every year, or something like that. But yeah. Okay, so speaking of people being bastards to each other, and one of like the greatest tragedies of all time, in my opinion, like The Green Mile was the one that actually came to mind first as a drama, because partially it's like drama is such a broad category that I went out and Googled like, okay, what do people consider drama movies? Because drama is one of those tags, like it's kind of an umbrella term, especially if you go back far enough in your English lit days, where it's just like everything used to be like a tragedy or a comedy, and those were dramas, right? Like it just everything stems from there. You could easily say, tons of sci-fi, tons of zombie movies, tons of horror, all of that stuff are dramas as much as anything. But The Green Mile is kind of what came to mind because I was trying to get away from like, I had a brief instance of like, oh man, let's go find the most dramatic like Star Trek movie. or whatever, and be cheeky about that, because that's where I was at with the topic at first, right? But the Green Mile, I feel like legitimately fits into that, though it's definitely got some, fantasy, maybe slashing, like edging into horror a little bit types of things. But it's by and large about these guys that work on death row, that they call theirs the Green Mile and whatever. So there are some fantastic elements about that. And, certainly almost everything to do about John Coffey, is there. And then if you're familiar with Stephen King stuff, and I mention this because I wasn't for a real long time, like John Coffey's character has The Shining, which is like, he has psychic powers or whatever, kind of shorthand you want to use, right? It's a little bit more complicated than that, but some of it's psychic. And then obviously he can manipulate, diseases. He can cure diseases by touching them and somehow absorbing them and expelling them and whatnot. And so, like you get this story that's, death row, and it starts out with, the main character being in an old folks home telling his story. You get a little bit of setup where you meet some of the main characters, like Brutal, of course, is fantastic. And then Percy's a fucking weasel. And some of the other guys, I forget, like Dean, and I forget the other guy's name,
Harry.
But Perry?
Harry.
Was that the old... Harry was that the older guy?
Yeah.
So yeah,
The Green Mile is a very good movie for, although all those actors where you're like, oh, that guy. It's like the entire cast, other than Tom Hanks, is that.
Right. Well, and John Coffey's character or actor.
Yes, and Michael Clark Duncan.
So,
yeah. Clark Michael Duncan, yeah, and this is it's ironic because like he did Armageddon before this, but I think this is the movie where I was like, I really like this guy, and then he was Kingpin in Daredevil and a bunch of other stuff, right? So anyway, so like they set up the characters, and despite the fact that these guys are guards on death row, like a big part of how Edgecombe, the main character, deals with his people is that he tries to treat them with dignity and respect, because they've already been condemned. Being an asshole to them is only inviting additional trouble, right? And so they do go out of their way to make them feel like people and to try and take their mind off of, the fact that they're condemned to die, to the point where like they get them out of their cell and take them somewhere to distract them with something while they're rehearsing the steps that they need to go through to execute them. They're using an electric chair, which, gets referenced a lot, for a bunch of different things, not just in the movie, but, carries weight outside of it. Percy is such a shitbird that he shirks, wetting the sponge used in the executions, and has one of the most brutal scenes of movies, period, right? Like, we talk about how I don't enjoy torture porn and that sort of thing. Like, this is one of those scenes that it's like I tend to not watch, because it's so brutal. Basically, you see this guy Delacroix get cooked, literally, because that's what's happening, and like the guards are helpless because they want to stop it because they know it's gone fucked and all of this stuff is terrible. I think it's Brutal steps in and says, you can't stop it, because if you stop it, he's going to live. And that's worse. Like, that's worse than what's going on right now. And so, yeah, there's a lot of interpersonal stuff, obviously, between the rest of the crew and Percy throughout the movie. And then you kind of have this, additional parallel story with John Coffey and the fact that like Edgecombe starts out having a bladder infection or possibly kidney stones or something along those lines. John Coffey saves him or cures him of it while nobody else is there to see him. And then, later on, he uses it to save the warden's wife. She's got a brain tumor. And, yeah, okay. I mean, so Mr. Jingles is there, but he also saves
Best
the
character.
mouse and then, is holding the mouse during. So Delacroix is the one who has the mouse as his pet. Percy kills it because he's a bastard, being a bastard, and then John Coffey saves the mouse and is holding it during the execution. And the implication is that he juices it, with his powers during the execution, and the mouse ends up living for like 70 years or something like that. They're only supposed to live like 18 months, I think, is what I was looking at. If you just assume common field mouse, and he ends up living for like 60 or 70 years. And so the implication is, you got 50 extra lifetimes and counting of time, which becomes more important towards the end. But anyway, so they take John Coffey to the warden's place at like 3 a.m. because they've got to try and get him out while nobody's looking. And he grabs the tumor. And then the part that I had forgotten is that he's basically keeping it. They think, he's taken too much of whatever, the evil is or whatever, he's done too much, but he's basically, it's like he toked and kept it in, because he carries it until he can give it to Percy. And then the scene that, it had shocked me and I had forgotten was that Percy basically goes and blasts Wild Bill. And it's like, so you've got all of this, but then the undercurrent that only like 3 people know about in the movie is like, so they bring in Wild Bill. He's like even worse than Percy, if you can believe it, but he lives up to his name, right? He pulls pranks of a sort on Brutal and, is always just kind of like, being a dick as a prisoner. He's wild compared to everybody else. But it turns out, so like the reason why John Coffey is there is because he found these 2 little girls who had been murdered and tried to save them. But because he's a giant black dude in it was like the 1940s, and he's not
in the South.
Okay, yeah, right. And he doesn't have very good language skills. He keeps telling them he tried to take it back, and everybody just kind of interprets that as a confession, when really he's trying to talk about how he tried to save them. So he gets condemned to be on death row. Well, it turns out Wild Bill's the guy that actually killed them. And so he gets his vengeance by, like, he figures it out because Wild Bill grabs him at one point, and because he's psychic, he's able to suss out all of Wild Bill's crimes, including that one. And then he basically holds this tumor, gives it to Percy to go kill Wild Bill because he's getting his vengeance in a way. And then at the end of it all, they can't do anything but execute him anyway, because how do you convince everybody else that that's what's happened? Like, you're all going to wind up in the loony bin or, fired at best, all of this stuff. So that's where, to me, it becomes like this great tragedy, is because I really feel for Edgecombe and everybody else, where they're like, he takes it to the point where it's like he's got to do his penance because he's killed one of God's greatest creations, is paraphrased from his lines. And they don't do it so much in the movie, but I understand in the book he goes on more about how, like, he realizes that Mr. Jingles has lived like 60 lifetimes or whatever, and when John Coffey gave Edgecombe the same memories and showed him what had happened, he did the same kind of thing to him. So Edgecombe expects he's going to live hundreds of years as penance for killing one of God's creatures, is kind of like one of the end takeaways there. But just super emotional, to me. And, like I even mentioned, one of the quintessential lines, in my opinion, is the whole, like, I'm just tired, boss. Like, at the end of it, they're talking to John Coffey and be like, what should we do? What do we want to do? And he's like, well, you got to go through with it. I'm just tired of people being evil to each other, and every time I see shit like that, that's the line that comes to mind. So, anyway, I don't know. That's, yeah. Probably doesn't even do it justice, but I think that's broad strokes. But
I mean, it's a good movie. It's a well-made movie. I hadn't watched it in a really long time until this, and so I was surprised at how much I enjoyed it again, because I mostly just remembered all of those bad moments of. I just remember this movie essentially as being torture porn, and so the entertaining bits in the middle was kind of a surprise to me. And they're still, I think it does veer into the torture porn, especially with Dell's execution, but less so on Coffey's execution.
Right.
It's a well-made movie. It's all the good actors in it.
Right.
I think it's one of the best movies of all time. I mean, I don't know, Stephen King's written some great movies, have been like great books that's made some great movies, like Shawshank Redemption as well, right? Mm-hmm. It's just
right.
They're
you should stick with prison settings.
Next level.
I mean, he does a good job. So,
No,
yeah,
he does.
it's
Actually, I think
it's
this and
wa-
Shawshank are probably my two. Because, like, I mean, The Shining's fine. I don't really care about his horror stuff. I never have. But
The miniseries
I-
better than the movie.
well, maybe. I don't know. I doubt that. But I think I like Shawshank the most. But this one comes up fairly close, considering it's it's not the same, but it's similar vibes. But
yeah. In retrospect, it's been wild, kind of understanding that how many of Stephen King's movies I picked, because I don't necessarily like favor his stuff on a day to day, right? But it's like when push comes to shove, like you've got Stephen King, as writing, you've got Stanley Kubrick, as directing and stuff like that. Like they really do kind of bubble to the top, right? Even though on a day-to-day basis, I prefer other movies to watch for general entertainment and that sort of thing. But it's like, there's a reason why these guys are towards the tippy top for what they do and everything. And, it's kind of funny that like Shawshank and Green Mile, like if you want a drama, that doesn't necessarily have to do with, all this ancillary stuff, like who's being eaten by what kind of monster, or, how many spaceships and that sort of thing. Like, these are really solid movies. I don't know. I mean, The Stand, I think, is also fantastic, but it'd be, so hard to just squeeze into a movie, and that sort of thing. He's just got these really solid stories, and I think as much as anything, it's because he spends time on the characterization, right? Like the stuff that I don't like is when he goes into like, and so this is how life was in 1930, and then you get like a history lesson in the middle of his books and whatever. But because I think you get some of that, like in it makes sense, because that's the idea of it, is like part of the monster is that it's generational, so some of the history actually matters, right, to the story, in my opinion. But then I think it was like Salem's Lot or something like that, where I felt like he just took like an interlude of like, and here's history for this section of town, and it's just like nobody cares. Like even the fact that like Salem's Lot is also kind of dealing with a generational type of monster, like that didn't seem to add to the story, in my opinion. So, but I don't know.
Have to bore me while doing it. I've actually that's like a line from On Writing, when he was giving something to his wife of, here's like a rough draft or something, and she was criticizing like, why is the character doing this thing, spending so much time and so many pages? He said it's really important to what he goes through later, and she said, but do you have to bore me while doing it? And it's just the thing that came to mind with all of these things.
Right.
I've only read one Stephen King book, and the first 100 pages or so in The Institute, it's just a guy going about his life, but it was, I don't know, it caught me. Like I was so engaged in this guy just living his life, and he didn't become relevant until then. You basically don't follow him for a while, and he becomes relevant 400 pages later or something. But it drew me in. He's really good at the character, like, work, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. I would have to read more Stephen King books to see what you say. But for the one time where I experienced it in the Institute, I was captured.
Well, we made it through 2 people in 48 minutes, so let's see.
Good thing I don't have to leave on time today or anything.
Yeah. Let's see. I guess I'll go. All right. Eternal Sunshine of Spotless Mind and Ghost in the Shell. I feel like I chose the ones that are less depressing than you people, or what? Maybe not.
Eternal Sunshine is less depressing.
I was gonna say, I'm pretty sure Eternal Sunshine is more depressing than both my movies.
See, I guess I have a different perspective on it slightly. I mean, it's kind of depressing. It was kind of like a heart-wrenching, but not. I think it ends on a point that I enjoy. Like
they're doomed to do the same thing all over again.
But
they'll die eventually.
It's like I liked that. I liked his response of it, of like the chaos of their relationship. I mean, you have whatever opinions of that. It seems to be a kind of toxic relationship and people, but there was the good sides too. And I don't think you should forget that. You can forget all the good and the bad, but like my reaction to the movie is kind of like actually summed up with just one of the background characters, doesn't even have a name or anything. When he goes into the clinic, there's a woman that has the box of all of the things of her dog. and she wants to forget her dog because probably the dog just died and now she's distraught and can't function. But my first reaction, and the one that stuck with me most, is like, don't forget this person who loved you so much just because now you're in pain. It's like the pain is part of the relationship in a way. It's like the kind of on a broad abstract levels. If 50% of marriages end in divorce, the other 50% end in death. No matter what, something bad is going to happen, but that's the good ending. And that's that's part of it. Like part of the promise of being in a marriage is like, yeah, I'm going to be there for as long as it's, well, good, because I'm not like against divorce or anything, but the full completion of it, you have to accept the good and the bad. And that's the thing that Joel realizes in the middle of like, don't take this memory. Please let me keep this one. And he's fighting and he wants to keep her. He realizes that he actually does want her in his life while he's doped up and having this procedure done to him. But the sense of like, I want to keep the good even with the bad, even if you could get to the point of realizing that this person can't be in your life, you don't have to feel bad about actually having loved them ever. And it's just like, there's a lot of about that in this thing, but also if you take away the lesson that you learned, you're going to repeat it unwittingly, unless you know something happened. So the fact that Joel and Clementine learn that they have done this before gives them the choice, versus like Mary, the assistant, she didn't know that she had the affair with Howard, and then she goes through the exact same motions because the reasons that she was attracted to him are still there. And that, so the tragedy of repeating it unwittingly, but if you have the choice and you have the knowledge that you've already done this, then it is actually a choice and it's interesting. And I like the fact that once they see that what they're going to go all those motions again, their personalities are still the same. And he says, okay, he accepts it. Like it does give them a different roadmap because they know where they've been and how they reacted. But I like the sense of hope that it gives. There was an alternate ending, apparently, of the fact that they have probably deleted each other from their minds over 15 times throughout their very long lives. That's depressing. The fact that they are actually just repeating the cycle and not breaking out of it. But if you just kind of accept the thing that, well, you have these tendencies, you can react to them instead of just be a slave to them. I don't think it's as depressing as others that have been on this list.
I thought it was crazy. I thought it was pretty depressing. I didn't, and I kind of got the feeling that they were doomed to do the same thing again and again. But in the end, but what I remember, like things from Eternal Sunshine sort of like Elijah's character is like really creepy. Major,
major absolutely, creep. He's a fucking creep.
Yeah, I kind of felt bad for Mark Ruffalo. Also, by the way, the casting in this movie is superb. Yeah. I felt really bad for Mark Ruffalo's character. He seemed like, except the job is kind of morally questionable, but I guess in this world it's fine. But other than that, he seemed like a mostly decent guy, and he was even there for his boss when the wife comes. He's like, shit, honk honk, like, even though it's his girlfriend in there, and he just kind of, I mean, kind of, yeah. He was, but and then both of these movies, I just thought that if Alex hasn't watched all of Black Mirror, she needs to watch all of Black Mirror.
I have watched all of Black Mirror.
Yeah, you got a thing you like.
I kind of. Well, both of these movies play with the idea of what it is, the experience of being human, and that's what I end up drawing towards. Of like I'm very interested in the ideas of free will. It's like the thing about Dark and like going through the cycle over and over and over again. And that was a tragedy in the best way, but it's as Eternal Sunshine is kind of the same thing. It's just not in time. It's just in their brains because they didn't experience the whole roller coaster. So they get on it again. They don't realize all of the good and the bad. And that's why like the fact that they learned that they had done it and then accept it, that's what makes it hopeful for me. But with Ghost in the Shell, she always has this question of, is she actually even a person? Because so much of her is cybernetic and replaced that she can't be fully certain of like, if she cuts herself, she'll maybe bleed, or maybe it's not. It's just artificial stuff. She has no real proof other than the fact that she keeps going, that she's even alive. But how different is she from the project 2501, I think, or 2206. Now I'm questioning whether I remember the numbers.
06.
2506. Okay. Like, how different is she? And that's why the project was so interested in her, because of the limits of whatever it is of the boundaries of being human. She has surpassed it. And it's a conversation with Bato about there's these things of what it means to be human, but then she, the Major, also has all of the net that she has connected to because of her position with Section 9. That's a part of her in a way that she doesn't want to give up. She can't give it up without feeling like she's losing a limb, but then she's a slave to Section 9. If she does leave, then her memories and her body parts get taken away.
For all intents and purposes, leaving Section 9 is death, right? It seems like you'd have to give back basically their whole body.
I mean, it might not be their whole body, depending on their choices of how far they've gone.
I don't know if they can disc. I guess they could kind of almost, because since she gets a new body in that movie, they can almost what's that series that Justin really likes, where their souls are in discs. Who they are.
Yeah, altered carbon.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, they have the cybernetic brains, and so that the brains can be picked up and moved, but or re-uploaded and stuff like that. But they would at least fuck with her memories, and she won't give up with that. So faking her death at the end is the best choice for her.
I thought it was pretty good movie. I hadn't seen it before. I don't watch a lot of the old anime stuff because the style kind of turned me off when I've seen stuff from it. But watching it was actually way better animated than I thought it would be. And I hated the ending. There was no ending.
Just the fact that she walked away.
Okay. So the whole plot up to this point, this is this AI, and then they merge, and then that's it. It's just nothing. We don't it feels like half a movie.
Kind of like leaving it open ended, and it seems again hopeful, at least in terms of what the Major has to go through, and she has the choices now. She's not restrained. And they've had since made a series of more movies that I don't know if they're considered canon.
I know they did a TV show or something. I don't know.
There's two different series of anime and several more movies. Like I've watched the anime. Yeah. The setting is definitely something that is drawn to me.
Right. Well, yeah, I'm not a huge anime fan, like just in general, but Ghost in the Shell is the best. I forget the other word, but the season 1 or show 1 or whatever it is, the something complex,
standalone complex.
Standalone. Thank you. That I love that shit. Like any show, it wasn't necessarily universal, but Bato and the Major going back and forth and some of their stuff. It was something that drew me to try and suffer through ScarJo's movie version, just to see. But I felt like just the mystery and some of the arcs and that sort of thing for Standalone Complex were great. Didn't really stick it out through the second one or anything like that. I'm sure I watched this movie, but it's been way too long. But yeah, I never really got drawn to it. But like this, I remember liking some episodes of Vampire Hunter D that I was introduced to, and I remember watching Cowboy Bebop, but it did not leave the same impressions on me that it did everybody else, because I always hear how amazing it is and how much like Firefly and all of these other great things, and I'm just like, I watched it, I don't remember having those opinions though. So
something about Cowboy Bebop is that I can understand why someone would compare it to Firefly from what I understand of the bounty hunters in space, but Cowboy Bebop to me seems much closer to No Country for Old Men.
Sure.
And so I feel like that's like a false promise or like a bad characterization in my mind. But I've also not watched Firefly, so I'm just getting it from background.
Right.
Right.
I mean,
the person who has not watched Fireflies.
Yeah, Firefly doesn't get super into like that kind of thing, but there definitely is a villain in season 1 called Niska, where he's basically like, he will just like torture and murder you because you failed him type of thing. So Firefly, like, despite the fact that the universe is fairly grim in my opinion. I feel like the day-to-day of the show doesn't necessarily focus on that. Like you definitely have moments and that sort of thing which you could push towards like a more grim dark kind of understanding, but like compared to some shows, right, like some shows make you feel it, whereas like Firefly, I feel like this shit happens, but I don't associate it with that kind of genre necessarily, right?
Yeah.
You know, some people talk about how gritty it is and all of this stuff, and it's like, I mean, it's got all of those elements, but somehow those aren't what grabbed me, right? You know, like they've got, I want to say the episode is Out of Gas, where it's like, you know, basically the whole crew has to abandon ship because, you know, they're more or less stranded, and it's just Mal, you know, trying not to suffocate because he won't abandon his ship and whatnot, and then, you know, he's just straight up shoves a dude through an engine at one point, and it's like, so, you know, there are terrible, horrible things that happen in this universe and are perpetuated even by, you know, the main crew, but that's not what I associate it with, right? You know, it's just like, it's still somehow like, I don't know, bright is the word that comes to mind, you know, because now that I'm thinking about it, like Jane also
Shiny.
betrays everybody and stuff, you know, yeah, but I think the movie does a better job visually selling, you know, a lot of that stuff because they have to deal with the Reavers, so you really kind of get into that. But yeah, I mean, to me, it's a fascinating universe, and you know, I have to put that shit in the back of my mind somewhere. But it's always going to be disappointing that we didn't get more of it. So, but yeah.
Well, we still got more movies to cover.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I say we just power through, right? So
Yeah, I'll power through. I've watched both of these. I did my homework. I get an A.
I did my homework too. I'm a good boy.
Okay, you get an
Barely. I finished Ben's movie right before, like the one movie right before we started this. So yeah, these are my movies. The Big Short. It's probably my favorite movie of all time. It talks about the 2008 financial crisis. I think it's a great look into our world today. It's presented in a good, like a very humorous way. The casting is beyond phenomenal. The way the director chooses to make movies, I really, really like. I also quite enjoy Cheney, even though I am less connected to the whole Cheney American politics thing. But The Big Short, that's an event that affected my life. Whereas if Cheney feels more foreign, right? But it's still I thought it was a very good movie. Yeah, I don't know what to say. Like, it's just I've seen it like 10 times. It's so good.
Yeah, I like The Big Short. This is a movie that I've seen several times. So it was also the first one I watched on this list because it was the easiest to commit to. Like, I know I could just put this on when I like fall asleep in bed or something, and then like I'm good. But sometimes it's hard for me to track exactly the ridiculous steps that they have to go through. And so I was paying like a lot of attention this time of making sure it could be issues that they have in the middle of the fact that it's definitely about to default, but the valuation is going up. Like the whole system is trying to cover the fact that everything's going to fall apart. Some of the details of that can be hard to remember an hour after I've watched it, but I love the movie going through it. Like that, this is one of the best casting for like Steve Carell of just like, I'm happy when I'm unhappy. Like it's the way that he's presented that he does this manic character, or Ryan Gosling's arrogance is hilarious.
To the tits.
Or just like snapping at people and making them leave the bathroom because he's having a conversation. Like, no, get out of here, go.
What did you hear? What did you hear, Hunting Guy?
Yeah, it's I love that.
Oh, that
even the breaking the fourth wall to be able to explain, like, so this didn't actually happen. This is kind of a narrative thing, but here's the details of how it really went down. Like, I have always been interested, or confused of what happened. Why did this thing get allowed to fall apart in such a disastrous way?
I mean, it's definitely explained very well in the movie. Right? I feel like I understand why and how it happened. I love the
loopholes, man. Right?
Yeah. The way that doesn't make sense is that the system doesn't make sense, and so like, why would you react this way? It's not logical. Again, nothing about it is, and that was the problem.
I think one of the big, from what I got from them, one of the big failings to why it could get so bad is that those rating companies were not governmentally controlled. They were privately held, so they were in competition with each other. Therefore, they compete. Whoever gave the best rating got the clients. So they just gave the best rating.
Yeah.
Which was a huge issue for.
If we don't give the rating, they'll go to our competitors right down the street, and then they'll get all the millions of dollars. And so I think, forgot his name, but the guy just like flat out called the business a whore. It's kind of true.
Yeah, and she also calls out like, "Why are you so interested?" Right, because they are betting against the system, and he's like, he has a very good point. Like, just make less. I think it says something like that.
Yeah. I think that Carol said, just because you're going to still make millions of dollars, but you can just make a little bit less to do it correctly. But no, they refuse.
Right. Yeah.
The scene where he like, excuse me, and in the middle of the presentation, and then just gets a phone call, walks up, and the guy who breaks the fourth was like, yeah, that actually exactly like that. It actually happened. This is great cast, great movie, great everything. I love this.
Very fun.
Yeah, that was definitely what I saw when I looked it up, because I wasn't as familiar with it, but when I saw the cast, I'm like, okay, I could get behind this, and then like no place I could find was streaming it, so didn't end up happening.
My Secret Helper?
Well, yeah, but we already discussed that, right? So when I do that, it becomes my personal time, is where like most of my time to watch TV or movies or anything is during dinner with the kids. So that cut out, hours during the week that I could do it. So that's kind of where we wound out. Because like some of the movies I could have grabbed on Amazon or whatever, but I was like, I'm not spending like $20 to rent movies for this topic either. So yeah. But
yeah. My second movie is a Danish movie called The Hunt, or in Danish, Jagten, because that's one word here. It is. I've seen it 2 times, and it's not a movie I particularly want to rewatch. It's a very tough movie. It's a very emotional movie. It's a very dark movie. It's very, you can really you feel for the main guy who's played by Mads Mikkelsen of Star Wars, Marvel, Hannibal. He's fairly popular. Casino Royale. He's very big and abroad these days, but he's been big in Denmark for a long time before that. It's a movie about I'm trying to think of the English word for this.
Preschool teacher.
I guess because we don't even. It's not called preschools here, but yeah.
Right. So I saw that in the subtitles when I watched it. Like they called it nursery, which I kind of figured out. So it's just before they go to grade school. It's the preschool. It's basically somewhere between probably maybe as young as birth to 5 years old.
Yeah, the way our system is set up is from about 1 to 6, you go to a kindergarten, kind of, and where it's usually split up into sections of kids from 1 to 2, 3 to 4, and 5 to 6, and then you go to school. And he works in that, and he used to be a school teacher, and he's now he works here, taking care of kids, and he's quite good at it. And then there's a misunderstanding, so he is falsely accused of sexually assaulting one of his friend's kids who were in this kindergarten. And it's about how this community turns on him, how it affects his life, his child, his pet, which gets me every time. It's about humanity, relationships. It just gets you. It's a really gut punch of a movie, and even the ending is just superb, because it's like because Justin hasn't seen it. I really want him to see it without knowing how the ending goes.
Yeah,
it's just what do you think of it, Alex?
It was definitely heavy. I mean, I knew what it was going into it, so it's not like I expected it to be jolly. I wasn't sure how it was going to end up. I mean, I'll keep things vague, but like, I wasn't sure if it was going to be good or if it was going to escalate into something worse. It maybe out of desperation, he might just like kill himself. I'll say that he didn't do that, but it's just like, it made me wonder if like, this isn't going to go away. There was no proof except for the fact that kids are saying things, but kids say shit. And the fact that people are going to be hyper vigilant about young children is both very understandable, but also the problem where it came in. And it makes sense that stigma's never going to go away to him.
Yeah, even though it's been proven and stuff, whatever, they're still going to. But yeah, where
right, the accusation,
fire.
The accusation has already destroyed his life, whether or not anything came to fruition with it.
That scene that probably gets me that's most disgusting to me is when the nursery teachers think there might be something wrong and they pull in an specialist that they know, not someone actually authorized, but someone who's and it's so leading and so and so like, and they're not doing it on purpose, right? But it's so ugh. Yeah, I don't know how to put it in words.
And that's like, I mean, it reminded me of stories I heard of the Satanic Panic. Of like, I wasn't paying attention if I was even alive at the time when all of that happened, but I have heard the stories of like the idea of repressed memories that were being revealed in therapy, and it was just all bullshit. But at least one of them was that like a daughter said that her father had done horrible, horrific things, and he had no memory of having done it. He was innocent, but he said she doesn't lie, so if she's saying it, I must have done it. And I think he went to jail for a couple of years until like there was like paper proof, like you were not there, this did not happen, get out of jail. I don't have any articles about that, but it made me actually want to look some of that stuff up. But leading questions and false memories, it's something that I was taught, at least when I was getting my bachelor's in psychology, of like, this is how you cannot do things. This is why witness testimony in court is not trustworthy. And yet when dealing with what she was like 4 or something, he was giving leading questions because he was trying to get anything out of her, and she had said, no, I don't remember. Why give so much weight to the one thing that she said, but not give weight to the other thing that she said?
Right. It's so interesting. Like, I'm saying this in complete ignorance, right? Because I didn't see the movie, but it's so interesting that you brought up the Satanic Panic, because as you were describing it, I'm like, wait a minute, this sounds like a foil of the Crucible. So, because you have similar kinds of things in there where, the way that they asked questions presupposed the answer that they wanted, yes. Right? And that was part of why, Giles Corey ended up not, giving them his witness, is because he knew damn well what was going to happen, right? They were, obviously whoever your witness is a liar, so you need to tell us so we can go get them too. And fuck you guys, like, that's not going to happen, but some of their questions during that, were fairly leading. So yeah, now I'm actually more interested to see this movie, for sure, that it deals with some of those ideas. But
I actually found it very funny, Andreas, that you had to speak up that Crucible is making you feel sick, because
this movie makes me feel sick too. But yeah.
Like Crucible is like, it's frustrating, but I guess I don't have that stomach churning feeling. But like,
for different reasons, kind of though.
Maybe, but like when he goes to the grocery store and they turn him away, like that made me feel like anxious. And then he has the absolute gargantuan-sized balls to walk back in there. Sorry, spoiling a little bit of something, but it's just like, I don't know. That was a moment where like it's so clearly gone way too far, and like really the only option he would have is to leave, but that doesn't seem to be something that he takes seriously. At least I wonder why.
The church scene as well is also without it's just whew.
Yeah, but that seemed like that was on the turn side of like, that's what the guy was saying. It's like, I can tell, I can see it. He didn't explain it right then, but that's the point when the father's like, oh, this was okay. But that when he's walking out of the store again, and he's just literally covered in blood, and like that is how far it went, and people feel like they're doing the right thing because they're protecting children, they think.
Yeah.
I understand why they feel so viscerally, but it is also like you don't get to be the bad guy either. Right. And every time they attacked him, I was like, call the fucking cops. This is maybe where like Americanness comes in. It's like they attacked him unjustly. He's not been proven in court yet. They broke into his house. I'm going to stop talking because I'm going to spoil more shit.
Don't say it.
It's a 10-year-old movie, man. It's not. Yeah,
it's not. It's for you, Winks. I really want you to.
I know.
It was just like, there's so many things that they do to him that he should have been litigating right back at them. In my opinion, maybe that's just I'm a worse person than he is.
No, not necessarily, but I mean, you run into that. I mean, depending on the situation, like if it sounds like it's kind of a small town situation, and you're going to run into the fact where it's like he's going to go to the authorities or the courts or whatever, and they're going to be people from his town anyway. That shit's going to is almost guaranteed to have happened here and still happening in America, let alone, like if it's a super rural thing, like, it sounds like he's lucky that they didn't just like lynch him or something, but
kind of, they absolutely went too far against him. It is an issue that it's interesting, but it's uncomfortable to think about. Louis Theroux did a I think it was kind of, I don't forget what it's called, it was like Weird Weekends or something, looking at pedophiles and what are their lives actually like, especially after they've gone through treatment. Unfortunately, they still need a place to live, and there's very little about that. Like Arrested Development actually made a joke once they had a community, like houses out in the middle of nowhere. There were no grocery stores, there were no schools around, no playgrounds, nothing. It was completely empty and out in the middle of the desert. And so it was just filled with pedophiles because that was finally the one place that they could live and actually have like an okay life. Because there was a guy in the Louis Theroux documentary that he had been set to be released, but they were looking for a place that actually matched the restrictions that he has to live by. And so he was staying in jail for months, years after his sentence had ended because there's no place for it to go. And so like Mads Mikkelsen being accused, like he still needs groceries. And so going to the grocery store and he gets attacked, he still needs to eat. What is he going to do? I mean, I guess there's Amazon at this point, but at the time, 2012, I don't think that was much of an option when they were so accustomed to going every day.
We barely have Amazon for grocery type stuff here, but we have alternatives now.
Yeah, I don't know what the logistics actually work, but they also kicked out his son. And there's definitely a theme in these dramatic movies.
Well, yeah, I mean the other part of this that we haven't mentioned yet is that people have a tough time with burden of proof type stuff too. Like you've got the old. It feels ancient at this point, but the whole innocent until proven guilty feels like we don't live by that anymore. But I definitely try to. Certainly, somebody under suspicion like that should be watched. It's not the same as somebody under suspicion like that should be beaten. I mean, even if he, if he goes through the court system or whatever, let the courts, issue his punishment. Now, on the flip side, I completely empathize and understand, like, if you catch somebody, accused of that, but in the act, basically, then, there are certain primal forces that are going to happen at that point. And while I don't necessarily ascribe to beating people accused or otherwise of committing certain crimes and whatnot, it's completely understandable, right? In those cases, but if you just have like a straight up accusation, and like in your case, it sounds, or in this movie's case, it sounds like it's a false accusation and that sort of thing. Like that's the danger, right? Like you're attacking this guy off of rumor. At the end of the day, you're assaulting somebody based off of a rumor you heard. It is completely fine, in my opinion, for you to have a gaggle of employees or whatever follow him around and make sure nothing shady happens. But like you said, he's not been charged with anything. There's no solid proof. There's a rumor about it, and you guys are beating him. Like that's just wild to me. So, but it's also why stuff like that, you know, in a weird kind of left turn, but semi-related, that shit turns my stomach in The Crucible or Stephen King novels and that sort of thing. When you have the religious nut job that he incorporates in most of his books that just rile up, you know, the population or whatever. You know, they do it in The Mist, they do it in a bunch of other movies as well, where it's just like you have that person that starts screaming scriptures and telling you about how the devil's in so and so, and it's like, that's horrifying to me, you know, as somebody who actually cares about burden of proof and that sort of thing, to just have somebody show up and be like, you know, I think so and so, you know, molested, you know, XYZ or whatever. Like, God, like both things are reprehensible, right? On the one hand, like, if that actually happened, obviously is, you know, beyond sickening. But on the other hand, for you to just show up and say it because it just popped into your head and there's no proof or anything like that, that's straight horrifying, you know, to be on the receiving end of that. So, but
yeah.
Do we want to call it there, or do we want to talk about?
I wouldn't mind talking about Ben's movies real quick. He's not really here to.
You guys,
Yeah, he can't
you guys
defend.
put in the work. You get to say your piece, I think. So
Awesome. Let's start with Bad Bats, I guess. Fucking boring. Up until, I mean, the feast somehow was like, that was more entertaining, it was more compelling, but why did it have to bore me up till that point? It just, fucking Christ.
It definitely had some pacing problems. I don't understand how it won an Oscar, really.
I guess they were, what was this, 1973 or something? I guess they were really bored. I don't know.
But
I think a lot of those movies are kind of like that, where they latch into some artsy thing instead of like whether or not the movie was good or entertaining, in my opinion, anyway. But you know,
so there was a great thing, like from around the lottery ticket winning and forward. It was pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, so I get that they had some amount of setup. Like, she was, like the music teacher that they had known at one point, and then he was the guy who sent Babette over there with the, like, okay, I guess I needed to know that he existed, but not really. It would have been fine if you just, like, started at the point of her arrival and move forward from that. I don't think I actually needed to know much of the interlude. Maybe the idea of the military guy that had, like, fallen in love with one of the girls and then wanted to marry her, but then he didn't, and he went away, and she had a very boring life instead. And I don't know. It's very boring, very long.
were there any good parts? I mean,
the ending,
winning
I guess,
the lottery sounds fun.
That she wins 10,000 francs in a lottery and spends the entirety of it on making a feast for these people in these tiny little town. And so that was the interesting part of, like, she was like,
that's literally the movie, apparently.
She was like the highest paid chef in Paris before whichever was this, World War I, whatever war that said center on the run. And so one of the military guy that had been a general, he's very successful, is like, he had said that he had paid 10,000 pounds or whatever to eat at this restaurant, and she remarked afterwards.
He wanted, but yeah.
I thought he said that he had or something.
No, he won a writing competition.
Okay. But she was the chef at that restaurant that he was referencing, and so this is the second time he had eaten her food. Basically, it's like she was that successful, and so she was giving this as a gift to all the people in the town, and these people who had very dull, dour lives of eating basically bread and ale, and that's it. They have something that tastes good, and they're happy. It's like the meaning of the story is that good things can make you happy. And they stopped fighting. Like, the people were just...
Even when they were trying to not enjoy it. And, yeah.
It's like...
Even the description of this movie is boring, so...
Yeah, we watched it from the first before, like, and it was more... Yeah, it was, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, this is one of those things where it's like, it gets into, you know, even the gangster stuff a little bit, right? Just to take a pot shot at something else that we've watched and talked about before. But it's like, it's okay to have, like, real life stuff in your movie and whatever. But I'm generally watching movies for the escapism. If I want real life, I'll go outside the front door or, whatever. But like, I've turned on the distraction box. I expect to be distracted, so I don't tend to just watch a lot of, like nonfiction, like even if you get into like mysteries or thrillers or something, the idea of it in my mind is it's a race between what's going on, in the media, whether it's book or TV or whatever, but you're trying to race them to the end a little bit to see who can figure it out first, you or the main characters or whatever, right? Like it's, I'm not just watching like, I don't know. It's like why even true crime a little bit is just a little bit too reality, like I'll go watch the news or something else. Why am I watching a movie about, somebody won some money and then threw a feast for a bunch of villages? Like, cool. That's super cool. But is that what I want to spend 2 hours watching or whatever, So, and I mean,
My Dinner with Andre. Sorry, I've never watched My Dinner with Andre. No, it sounded really boring to me. But that sounds riveting compared to Babette's Feast. I mean, like there was something of like I kind of enjoyed the people who had lived such dull lives. Like, oh, this tastes kind of nice. Wine might be a nice thing to have instead of the devil's liquid or whatever. But it's just, again, part of it felt like being in church, and it was like, God, I hate religion, especially when it makes people unhappy. And it's just the whole thing was tied up with like.
I did like the scene where she just gets there and they show her how they cook, and you can just tell how she's like, I'm gonna need to do something about this. Yeah. And she does, like, she really spices up their cheap meals. Like, she makes it a lot better. There's this scene where the homeless, they feed the old people who don't have that much money or food. They give food to them. Where like, so she goes away to collect this money. So these old ladies have to cook meanwhile, and they go back to cooking what they know, which is an old Danish, very disgusting dish called øllebrød, which is like beer bread. It's bread and beer made to porridge and water, and it's not very good.
It made me wonder. I'm glad you've had experience with this.
Yeah, no, it's not very good. As a person who can drink beer and like drink beer on its own, eat rye bread and all the together in a porridge, no, no, thank you. But yeah, so they make that, and you can tell, like, because when she made food for them, it was like a nice soup, and it looked like it looked okay, right? What they make is just like, and you can tell the guy who's eating, he's like, oh man, Babette's gone. This is terrible. Babette, come back. That part I liked.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, it's hard to say, like, there were parts of it that I liked, but there's also just like an hour and a half up leading up to it or something. Good God.
Babette, everything around Babette was pretty good. All the other stuff was trash.
Yeah.
Sounds like one of the most aptly named movies I've heard of in a while. So
it is that. I guess we'll say that. Although I think The Hunt actually,
like,
the framing of it was pretty good.
Yeah, with a name like Babette's Feast, I was almost expecting it to be, like I don't know the word. I just lost it, but like not like a kind of like a misnomer, right? You like, just think about it. You've got Babette's Feast compared to Pan's Labyrinth, both picked by the same person in this case, right? So it's just like, Pan's Labyrinth, it's like, doesn't quite fully represent the idea of the movie, even though like all of those things are in the movie at the end of the day. But if I told you Pan's Labyrinth, you wouldn't be like, well, I suppose it's about a labyrinth, right? Or whatever. Whereas like Babette's Feast is just like, look, man, it's what it said on the tin. What do you want?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
The other movie, Grave of the Fireflies.
It was one of the classics.
This one I know a little bit more about, at least, but
I had never watched it, so this kind of forced me to do it. It was one of those things like, yeah, I guess I should. It's one of the classics, especially of the animated movies. It's Studio Ghibli, however you pronounce it.
Ghibli. I'm not sure.
Ghibli, okay. Yeah. It's beautiful. But I saved Train to Busan to watch after because I knew I would need a pick-me-up.
It is very depressing.
The zombie movie is the pick-me-up.
Yeah. I love
me a solid zombie movie, but yeah.
It's very depressing. I got very frustrated with the main character and his pride. I mean, his pride and stubbornness killed his kid sister. And it really irked me.
I don't know if it's entirely pride.
It's.
I mean, some of it is, yes, because he refused to go back to the family, but that family was also berating them every day.
Sure, you eat it up. It's your kid's sister. They were bastards, but he chose to leave. He couldn't take care of her. They were not doing well. She was getting really sick. He had time to go back and eat it up and take the abuse, which fucking sucks. They were assholes, but he still chose not to do that, and it was really frustrating. I think it's presented that way on purpose. Personally,
yeah,
yeah.
This description that I read, that it was based on a book that was autobiographical. I mean, granted, it's framed that the main character dies in the beginning, and so he's like looking back at his life as a ghost.
Yeah, that's the one I read. That's the one. He didn't die. The guy who wrote it.
Clearly, he wrote a book.
Yeah.
And so this.
I'm a little confused on the events here, guys. So it's autobiographical, but he's a ghost. So it was ghost written, is what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah, but he was his own ghostwriter.
Mm-hmm. Something about Patrick Swayze, I'm sure, is in there in a pottery class. But
no, that's a different. Yeah, that's right, Dirty Dancing, right?
Yes.
You were concerned, so
I was.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like I shouldn't know more about these movies, and I don't even think I've seen either one of them. Yeah, Grave of the Fireflies is very depressing. Like, I know things were bad. They were in a worse situation than most, like even to the point that they didn't even know that the war had ended. Until like he was like trying to get something from a bank, and people were just talking about the Great Surrender or something, and then he's shocked, like, oh my god, the Great Empire of Japan lost the war. Yeah, it was a complete and total surrender. No description of anything else except for the Navy's been completely wiped out. Oh, that might be why Dad isn't responding to any letters. They could have figured that out much earlier than that, especially since it seems like their aunt did. He called them orphans, but he still seemed to have this hope that Dad will respond to this letter. Yeah. It's depressing.
It really is.
It's heavy stuff.
And it just feels so pointless that it went the way, like the life went the way it did. Well, again, the end is she's a horrible person. But yeah, fuck. There's nothing. It had sweet moments, right? They had there was a great relationship between the brother and sister, and there was some really sweet moments of them having a good time together. But man, it was a rough movie.
Yeah.
Not bad movie.
No, it's beautifully made. It's very well done. I mean, there's no fault to it. It's just like you have to be prepared for that emotional punch.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's Ghibli, so it is by definition it's beautiful. But
I came on a little red-eyed for the pre-show because I had just finished that movie, and it's only one of these movies that I cried. I think Green Mile I might have cried too the first time, not when I rewatched, but this one it was like, whew.
Yeah, it's pretty good at digging up old trauma, I'd have to say. I mean, maybe just for me, but as Ben should have been here to talk about it, and he's not. So if he disagrees with any of our descriptions of it, he could respond.
Yeah.
He's not going to EG this one and show up at 30 minutes after the episode and be like, now listen here and correct us. Right. So.
Oh, he forgot us. I would guess. Or he's like, oh, it wasn't a Dresden Day? Something like that.
Yeah.
That's what we're going to get.
Hopefully everything's fine in real life land. So.
Yeah.
I would take it like Master if he was like in a car accident or something.
Yeah.
Right.
But
it's not the first time he's like been like, oh shit, was that today or was that? I thought it was Dresden. Yeah.
I mean, it's easy for me. I just show up every Saturday and it's like, oh, wait, what are we doing? What?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Who's in charge around here? Oh shit.
Exactly.
That's
Justin
shows up.
don't
Like-
control things, and I was just like, I'm remembering that for forever.
I see we got different things out of that interview. Then.
I got a lot of things out of that interview, but one of it was just like the best directors just kind of let things happen. It's like, yeah, I'm just exactly.
Yeah, Justin, he just shows up and he's like, "Oh, it's not Dresden. I was supposed to watch 10 movies. Yeah, I watched one or two. That's me. That's what I did."
Yeah. It turns out that I've probably seen like 2 of them in the past, just not like recent enough. Part of the issue with this topic too was like even so, Green Mile was probably one of the most recent ones that I've seen, and that was like 10 years ago. So I at least rewatched my movies so I could talk about them. But yeah, like
You can have a tangent on zombies anytime.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that was great, obviously, but yeah, like HBO has like all of the Ghibli movies except for Grave of the Fireflies and stuff like
hilarious.
that. So.
For me, for Netflix, it was every movie except Grave of the Fireflies.
Right.
Yeah.
Not over here. So yeah.
Anyway, I think we should probably wrap it up. And next week
Yeah.
we'll be talking about Dresden Files, the
Law. Well, actually,
Law, the new
get
novella?
into the spoilery dissection of the novella that we got to have early. It was, yes, exciting.
Did you
Wonderful.
feel special?
I
Again.
did.
We finally made it, guys. Well, making it. We're in the process still, but But that was definitely a checkbox, for sure. Like several even, like it was our first time for Marsters, and all that stuff. So
we got an early release. We got a lot of things. Like that was definitely a peak. Might have been the biggest peak.
I will say the Marsters was just a delight to have on, and he was just fanboying with Jim with the rest of us for the whole hour.
I mean, yeah, in hindsight, he did half of our job for us because he was just so excited to talk to Jim. So,
yeah, I was happy to just kind of to watch them interact, and the Marsters was. I don't think there's any other way to put it. I'll just say he's adorable when he was excited about things and all the things that he was feeling and saying, and just like I wanted to at first just describe it as humble, but I think it's more than that. He was just adorable.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's fanboying, and it's funny because like that was the whole like leading comment in a way where it's like, you're famous too, right? Like
got a good chuckle out of that one.
Yeah. It's like people watch you on your own merits, not just because you're that guy who narrates the Dresden Files.
I started the Dresden Files because he narrated it. Like
I think for me it was a happy surprise. Like I had 3 or 4 different people telling me before one finally handed me the book, and then I might have even been a couple of books deep before somebody was like, that's Marsters, right? So it's just like, holy shit.
Yeah,
I remember getting to surprise Colin with like, "Hey, it's Spike," and he's like, "Oh my god, it's James Marsters!" Like he actually knew the guy by name, and it's like I thought most people would just recognize him as Spike the Vampire.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
For me, it was like I was reading very specific books, and Goodreads kept saying the Dresden Files, and I was like, no, it's not specific enough of what I want. So I kept putting it to the side, and then I was like, audiobook James Marsters, like that's Spike. You know what? Fine. I'll give it a go. And now here we are.
Yeah, 7 years later. All right. I suppose we've gone way over for today, but that's what we do and we're excited. We like to do this. That's the reason that we actually do this, because it's fun. So thank you for sticking with us, and see you next time.